the town of Fallsburg in New York, there is a religious leader named Imam Encarnacion. He has two children, an 8-year-old boy and a 16-year-old girl. The boy's name is Mustafa and carved on his father's card plate. The girl's name is Zelina. Now Imam Encarnacion longs for his childhood days.
I used to live by a credo when I was a kid, and you might not have ever heard it. It's baseball, hot dogs, apple pie, Chevrolet. Now, if you knew the significance of that statement, baseball, hot dogs, apple pie, Chevrolet. Baseball is the national pastime. Hot dogs is the favorite snack. Apple pie is the favorite dessert. Chevrolet was the #1 car back when I was a kid. So it was baseball, hot dogs, apple pie, Chevrolet. New York Yankees, New York Mets.
Those days are now gone for him. He knows. And it's not because he's aged, and as a result, he cannot enjoy the life a younger Muslim could. It's rather because time has changed. There was little warning.
In a second, that looks like a good-sized plane came in and hit the World Trade Center from the other side. So this is obviously, or would seem to be, and again, I'm dealing in speculation, but it would seem like there is a concerted attack.
It all happened not long after September 11, 2001, when terrorists destroyed two of New York's tallest towers. This time around, Imam Encarnacion's main concern is no longer just about whether the Yankees win or lose. It's no longer just about whether he can have apple pie after dinner.
What they call a moderate Muslim to an Islamist, to an extremist, they paint us with one brush. We're all terrorists, that we're all potential terrorists. If I get stopped 4 times a year by one police agency or another, it's too little. I get a visit from the FBI at least twice a year.
It makes no sense, just a little faith to make it a better place.
The family's first victim of religious hatred was the daughter. Zelina was only 8 years old. She was not able to grasp what had happened 2 years earlier on 9/11. In the morning, business was as usual for Zelina. She put on her Islamic clothes. She packed whatever she needed for her 3rd grade classes. She expected the kind of childhood day which grown-ups like her father are now nostalgic about. But that day didn't go as usual. Some of her classmates bullied her, using a word that she didn't understand.
The first time I was bullied was in 3rd grade, and it wasn't like severe or anything. They just said, "Don't sit next to me, you terrorist." That's it. Then I didn't know what they were saying, so I took it like, what are they calling me? Because I didn't know what it was. And so I went home, I said to my dad, "They called me a terrorist today, what is it?" And he called the school up.
Her father's phone call would not put an end to terrible experiences. Indeed, Zelina would face more bullying as she continues to wear a headscarf.
And then it started to progress as I got into 5th grade. People started calling me stupid Muslim, terrorist, camel jockey, all those names. And when I started wearing my hijab, the school has a policy that you cannot wear hats. And the kids were saying, "Well, why can she wear a hat and we can't?" And I tried to explain to them, it's not a hat, it's a scarf. And it protects your modesty. In 8th grade, which was the next year, I was in the lunchroom and 2 kids came up to me and said, "How's your uncle Osama bin Laden?"
Zelina's story makes headlines in local newspapers.
The took the article. It said the article says high school teenager bullied for wearing hijab, and they took and changed the headline and said high school student bullied for wearing a bag over her head.
The final attack on Zelina would not remain just verbal.
This year, I was in 9th grade and I was in social studies class, and from behind a student came and he hit me in the back of the head with his binder. And the pin went into my head and turned.
Zelina hails from Puerto Rico, a U.S. territory in the Caribbean. Her Christian ancestors converted to Islam nearly a century ago. But it's not their mere conversion to Islam that has caused the recent hardship. This is a post-9/11 wave of discrimination against those who appear to be Muslims in the United States.
That is nifaq. That is hypocrisy.
Zelina's case highlights the deepness of that discrimination. It has gone to a level which does not even spare children. Recent statistics point to a rise in hate crimes against American Muslims.
The numbers, of cases reported, are always dependent not only on how many cases are actually happening, but also people's willingness to come forward or even their awareness that there are free services to help them out. However, in the last 10 years, I've noticed sometimes a steady growth and sometimes even an exponential growth in the number of cases that we receive. In the last few years especially, I've been full-time for a year and a half, and before that for a year as an intern. I've noticed, an increase from, about 150 cases one year to 250 cases last year. And so this is for New York State, right? So nationally, the cases certainly increased. I know that last year in the calendar year 2011, CARE chapters around the country total, we received over 2,000 complaints of discrimination and harassment and hate crimes and things.
These victims have often remained invisible and underreported in the Western media. They pay the price for a crime they neither committed nor had the ability to stop. In fact, many Middle Easterners don't even need to be religious to be subjected to hate crimes and police scrutiny in cities like New York. It's enough that they just share the same nation with the 9/11 hijackers. Nation-state is the notion that the West itself created to divide the world in the first place.
There's no more hunger, no need for shelter. Isn't there enough to share? Or is it that we just don't care? We're here for a day or two.
They associated terrorism with anybody has any idea about Islam, either a Muslim or married to a Muslim or was born in a Muslim country or wears a Muslim attire, kind of flags the hate and brings out the worst in people.
After 10 long years of U.S. engagement in foreign wars, U.S. President finally announced the good news that many had long waited for.
Tonight, I can report to the American people and to the world that the United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden.
Americans went on the streets to celebrate the news. But bin Laden's death failed to return the lives of American Muslims to its normal pre-9/11 state.
The week that Osama bin Laden was killed in Pakistan. That week, I remember, I think a lot of us had some hope, you know, that would provide some closure for Americans, that would, you know, make people feel better and move on a little bit. Quite the opposite. That week we had a spike in the number of cases reported. We had one case in New York, and there was a very similar case actually in the South as well. But right here in New York City, a teacher asked one of the students, a 6-year-old or 7-year-old student, asked them, "Oh, you must be sad since your uncle was killed this week."
When Osama bin Laden was killed, it was a big news in America that year. So the assistant principal took about 8 or 10 large pictures, and she put them on the walls of the classroom, right in front of the kids. It's not like as current events where she could, okay, this is a picture of Osama bin Laden, what do you just write about it? But 10 pictures on a wall with Arabic students and others shows that that assistant principal is very insensitive to their feelings. Those students have nothing to do with Osama bin Laden. Maybe they're very happy that he was killed, but that those pictures and that gave other students a weapon to tease and harass the Muslim students.
Discrimination against Muslims is not just confined to day-to-day interactions at the society level. It has also been noticed in the workplace.
We have other cases, for example, of employment discrimination, where someone would be, where we had cases where a woman was denied a job because she wore hijab, because she wore a headscarf. And in fact, that it was an Abercrombie & Fitch store told her, and this was the second time this happened in the last couple of years, where they told the girl that you can only work here if you remove the headscarf.
In 2011, the US Congress heard a report which said Muslims faced a rising tide of employment discrimination in the United States. The report documented workers being bullied by colleagues and employers. It also reported cases who had been denied jobs merely on religious grounds. Thomas Perez is the Assistant U.S. Attorney General for Civil Rights. He said there had been a 150% jump in workplace discrimination against Muslims. They were often over religious dress and worship schedules. Musad Al-Muntasir is originally from Yemen. He has been living in the United States for 45 years. It's nearly half a century. This period has been long enough for Al-Muntasir to marry and see his grandchildren. He has proven to be a successful American too. He currently owns an 8-apartment building in Brooklyn and a decent car. But Al-Muntasir doesn't know how many more years he should live in the United States to be counted as a genuine American.
This country, I've been living here for the past 45 years, and I love it. This is my country. I'm an American Muslim. This is where my children were born. I have 7 children who went to school here. 2 of my sons were in the United States Marines, and both now are police officer. One is a detective, and one is in transit authority. And they practically have no connection with Yemen as much as they have a connection with the United States, because that's their country, that's where they're born. But people do not see them as Americans because of their names. They will have like a big question mark. Where's their loyalty to? Is it to America or is it to Yemen?
In a country whose very first settlers include blonde and blue-eyed Europeans, what reveals Al-Muntasir's identity is often his appearance rather than his religion.
Some students very sympathetic to the Muslims. Others are very hard, you know, especially if they hear a teacher, for example, telling the principal in a meeting that he does not allow Muslim students to use the computers because they're going to learn how to make bombs. Now, my colleague who was at the meeting came and told me.
Nearly 11 years have passed since the attacks of 9/11, which brought down New York's Twin Towers right here behind me. The reconstruction of the site is projected to finish by the end of 2013, but the impacts of those attacks will no doubt last for many more years to come. After 9/11 attacks, the US government has drafted new anti-terrorism legislations, which have made lives more difficult for many Muslims. This is particularly so in the state of New York, where police have started spying on the members of the religious minority for years. They send disguised agents into Muslim gatherings in mosques, universities, restaurants, and hookah bars.
There used to be a Caucasian Muslim who is very long beards and with thawb. With us here, he pretend to be learning and pretend always that he is new to Islam and he love it. But later on, we know that his job is just, you know, to go after people and write about them and report. But alhamdulillah, thank God, he was not able to find anything because we do not have anything hidden in the center. We are not planning to do anything except good.
Nobody had known about this until it was first reported by the American news agency, the Associated Press. The news agency won a Pulitzer Prize for its years-long coverage of NYPD's spying activities.
When I first found out, I was extremely angry that we were getting, you know, that we, just because we were Muslims, we were being subject to this sort of surveillance. I was, you know, angry. I was very infuriated. And I definitely wanted to, you know, protest, sign petitions, and get the school to condemn the NYPD practices. And this was going on with other universities. Yale came out, NYU came out, and other MSAs, for example, were mobilizing to condemn the NYPD.
Monitoring the lives of American Muslims has raised the question of how free the members of this religious group are in a country that takes pride in being one of the world's oldest democracies.
Everybody he has his own privacy, and this is no good. You know, where is the freedoms in? If you go in my privacy, this is no free anyway. You're not free anymore.
Most of the members within the MSA were scared. They were scared about the NYPD spying on them. They were scared that something was going to happen, especially with reports going on about how Muslims were getting picked off the street and being made into informants, or, you know, being arrested and interrogated. People were scared. People were there was a culture of fear developing within the MSA, and people were extremely vigilant not to talk about any sort of political things.
But Clay Lopez, a former CIA officer, sees the spying activities as being necessary to keep the country safe and prevent the reoccurrence of attacks such as that of 9/11. Because Lopez was traveling, the only way we could reach her was through Skype.
The New York police, as you mentioned, probably this country's premier police force, certainly in terms of its ability to uncover and to stop these kinds of terrorist plots, have been doing a good job, and you know, we have to give a tip of the hat to all of our national security forces, law enforcement, for keeping us as safe as they have. But the plots continue, yes, no question.
So you think this NYPD surveillance activities are necessary to keep the country safe too?
Yes, I do. I think that NYPD Commissioner Ray Kelly has done a superb job. The proof is in the pudding, as they say. It has been now coming on, 10, 11, more than 11 years since the attacks of 9/11, and New York City has not suffered another such attack, nor has the United States. in that time. So I do have to hand it to the NYPD for their aggressive training and their aggressive tactics on the issue that we're talking about, which is Islamic jihadist terrorism.
So the issue with NYPD surveillance of Muslims is really about the trade-off between civil liberties and security, not just national security, but really local security. This is what NYPD does. And the real question is where is the right balance in that? And so I think some of the activities that the New York Police Department are supposed to have engaged in are pretty clearly on the right or okay side of the line. For example, looking at public websites of Islamic groups. This is, a publicly available set of information. It shouldn't be a problem that NYPD looks at it any more than if I look at it or you look at it. Other activities, such as putting people inside groups, are a little more questionable. These are public meetings of groups, so presumably anybody, me, you, an NYPD officer could go, but in some cases it's not clear that the New York Police Department was above board in representing themselves at these meetings.
Not every Muslim complains about being monitored by the police. Some place a higher value on the prospect of a more secure life than on a more protected privacy.
It's not a big issue because if you was in Russia, the KGB would be watching you. So it's like no big issue. It's a part of life. It's a part of way of life to be watched. The most important thing is that we watch ourselves and we become good Muslims, because that is the system. The system has to make sure they went to school to learn how to uproot and capture criminals, not us. So everybody has criminals among them, so they have to take care of the criminals.
I think if you are on the right path, you're not doing anything wrong, even if there's surveillance on, there's nothing to be afraid of. We should live the right way. We live here, we got a lot of opportunities here, so we should follow rules and regulations.
The 9/11 attacks led to the rise of more debates on whether Islam is inherently violent. In 2008, Wynkooping produced a controversial documentary film called The Third Jihad. The film talks about a cultural jihad in which some American Muslims are allegedly engaged to transform the country into an Islamic state. It shows a doctored picture displaying an Islamic flag flying over the White House.
ما نعتقده أن جميع الأرض لا بد أن تكون تحت حكم الإسلام.
We believe Islam will dominate.
It's an entire movement, and the idea of it is hatred for our way of life.
فأمريكا إلى زوال والإسلام إلى بقاء.
The documentary features interviews with notable figures and politicians, including the New York Police Commissioner Ray Kelly. The New York Times calls The Third Jihad a dark film, which portrays a negative image of American Muslims. The Times report says that police have used the film in its anti-terrorism trainings.
Rudal made several attempts to talk to the New York Police Department on its controversial surveillance of Muslims, but nobody was willing to talk to us.
All the victims pay the price for having some sort of connection to the Muslim world. Muslims facing discrimination are not only those who are devoutly religious. Some change their names. Some avoid practicing religious services and rather go to bars and nightclubs. Some totally assimilate into American culture. But none can be immune to police scrutiny in New York. None can run away from the discriminatory perception that has emerged in the West since 9/11.
You need to remember also that in this country, slavery was legal, you know, and the internment, the imprisonment of Japanese Americans during World War II, that was legal. You know, the Jim Crow was legal, you know, and so here I think we need to have that longer view of history as well. I would not be satisfied, you know, if the NYPD were to be sued and the court were to say that what the NYPD did was legal. Because honestly, if the police are allowed to spy on us for no reason other than what we say or believe, if they're allowed to flood our mosques and our schools and our institutions with informants, if they can entrap, you know, people with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder and low IQs into committing crimes and making headlines out of us, if they're allowed to torture people, if they're allowed to indefinitely detain people, if the law allows for that, and it might, then the law needs to change.
Most of the attempted terrorist attacks are directed against New York that are directed against the United States, right? I mean, for whatever reason, terrorists very seldom, I mean, they do, but very seldom try to attack Los Angeles or Washington or Atlanta or Chicago. It's almost all, for whatever reason, New York. So there have been attempted attacks since September 11th, some of which have almost succeeded, like Faisal Shahzad, some of which have come sort of close, like Najibullah Zazi, others much less so. But there have been attempts, so it's not something you can disregard.
You go your entire life thinking, well, you know, you're in the United States. You have the right to practice your religion. You have the right to, you know, express yourself the way you want to, as long as it's with accordance with the law. So when people start finding out about the demographics unit, about the Muslim surveillance, about surveillance of Muslim communities, then it kind of throws you off. Like, what does it really mean? What rights do we really have? And how does this differ from what has happened historically, you know, with other ethnic groups, with other religious groups, you know, in this country?
Nothing really upset me that much because it was childish. It was time for us to grow up, and they just, I guess they wanted to get a kick out of it. They thought it was funny. They tried to make me cry.
We are very loyal to this country. We lived here for a long time, and we will fight for our rights as American Muslims.